Sometimes I think back to how it all started, how we almost lost everything, and I wonder if I should have seen it coming. Hindsight, right? It's a cruel joke. Back then, all I saw was the family legacy. Mama Rosa's kitchen, our parents' dream, circling the drain, and the only thought in my head was, save it. It wasn't just one thing. You know how these things go. It was a perfect storm of disaster. First, there was Dad. I love him, I do, but his penchant for sure things at the track bled him dry, and eventually he started treating the restaurant's accounts like his personal ATM. Small amounts at first, then bigger chunks. We only found out how bad it was when the suppliers started demanding cash up front, but the real killer blow came from Dario, the manager Mom and Dad had trusted for 15 years. Turns out, Dario wasn't just managing, he was embezzling, systematically, cleverly, for years. By the time we uncovered it, the coffers were practically empty, debts were piling sky high, and the eviction notices were starting to look terrifyingly real. I was 25 then, just starting to get my own life on track. I had this cute little bungalow I'd poured my heart and savings into renovating, my sanctuary. I had plans, but seeing the panic in Mom's eyes, the defeated slump in Dad's shoulders, I couldn't stand by. My siblings? Let's call them Lorenzo, the eldest brother, M30, Julia, middle sister, F28, and Antonio, youngest brother, M23. Lorenzo scoffed and said Dad made his bed, Julia cried about losing her allowance from the business, and Antonio just disappeared whenever things got tough. It was clear. If Mama Rosa's was going to survive, it was down to me. So I did it. I sold my bungalow. My beautiful little house with the garden I loved, gone, just like that. Every cent went into paying off the most urgent debts, placating the suppliers, basically stopping the immediate bleeding. But that was just the start. The stress? God, the stress. It was relentless. 100-hour weeks became my norm. Sleep was a luxury. Eating? Sometimes I'd realize at midnight I hadn't had anything since a stale croissant that morning. It took its toll. Within a year, I developed this nagging, persistent pain in my gut, diagnosed later as a chronic stress-induced condition. Flare-ups would leave me doubled over, but I'd just pop some pills and keep going. Because who else was there? And my siblings? Oh, they were around. Sometimes. Lorenzo would swagger in occasionally, smelling faintly of booze even at lunchtime, complaining about the quality of the free meal he expected. Julia would flit in, dressed to the nines, expecting cash for her shopping sprees. Money we simply didn't have. Antonio perfected the art of being busy elsewhere whenever a difficult shift or a messy cleanup job was required. I caught Antonio pocketing cash from the till more than once. Small amounts, 20s mostly, but it felt like a stab in the back every single time. When I confronted him, he just laughed it off, said it was his birthright. All three lived surprisingly well considering the family business was practically bankrupt. Driving cars I couldn't dream of affording, taking trips, always needing a loan from the business I was desperately trying to keep afloat, and asking them to help, to actually scrub pots, deal with a backed-up toilet, or stay late for inventory. Forget it. That was dirty work. Antonio eathed them. The bailout was a nightmare. Banks wouldn't touch us with Dad's history and the embezzlement scandal. Loan sharks were circling. I spent weeks negotiating, pleading, structuring a deal with a private lender who saw potential but demanded immense collateral and stringent oversight. Here's the crucial part. They needed a single, reliable point person, someone whose personal assets were on the line, someone they could trust. My siblings? They wouldn't even consider putting their names on anything that involved personal risk. Lorenzo literally laughed when I asked him to co-sign. So, the entire complex debt restructuring, the agreements that saved the restaurant, ended up solely in my name. It had to be me. Around the same time, during the peak chaos, the building lease and the all-important liquor license came up for renewal. Forms needed signing, documents needed filing, amidst putting out a dozen other fires daily. I handled it all. I distinctly remember leaving the renewal forms on the office desk for Lorenzo and Julia to sign as co-applicants, needing their signatures as family members involved in the business. Weeks later, buried under supplier invoices, I found the forms still sitting there, unsigned, gathering dust. They'd forgotten, or just couldn't be bothered. With the deadline looming, I had no choice but to file them with only my signature as the sole leaseholder and license holder. At the time, it felt like just another burden I had to carry alone. Later it felt like fate. For about 2 years after that hell, things actually started looking up. It was brutal, grinding work, but we clawed our way back. Customers started returning. We introduced some new dishes that became hits. I implemented strict financial controls. And then came the day I looked at the monthly P&L and saw black ink. Real, honest-to-God profit. It felt like reaching the summit after climbing Everest barefoot. Around the same time, Mr. Stanley, the landlord, a stern but fair old guy, called me in. He'd seen the changes, the hard work. He offered me, specifically me, a new 5-year lease renewal on incredibly favorable terms. He said he appreciated dealing with someone responsible. That should have been another warning sign, maybe. But honestly, at that moment, it just felt like validation, a sign that maybe, just maybe, we'd made it. That glimmer of hope, that brief taste of success. That's when things really started to turn ugly with my siblings. It was like the lack of immediate crisis removed any need for pretending to be supportive. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. According to them, they were the masterminds behind the recovery. Extended family gatherings became unbearable, listening to Lorenzo spin tales of his business acumen saving the day, or Julia implying her social media savvy brought customers back. They conveniently forgot the years I practically lived there, the house I sold, the chronic pain I still managed daily. They started redecorating parts of the restaurant without consulting me, putting up these ridiculously posed photos of the three of them, looking like successful entrepreneurs, right by the entrance. My ideas, menu changes that I researched and implemented, suddenly they were claiming them in staff meetings. Yeah, Julia and I were just talking about adding truffle fries last week, Lorenzo would say, completely ignoring the fact I'd presented a cost analysis on it a month prior. The final straw on the credit-stealing front was the restaurant renaissance party they threw. Catered, expensive, flashy. My invitation felt like an afterthought, and the toasts were all about their incredible journey. I wasn't central. I was barely mentioned. Then came the money drain, again. Now that there were actual profits, their sense of entitlement exploded. I discovered they'd voted, just the three of them, to drastically increase their own salaries, nearly doubling them, without a word to me. The business credit card statement started showing insane charges. 5-star hotel stays listed as supplier meetings, bar tabs that could choke a horse under client entertainment, weekend trips to Vegas classified as market research. And the loans started again, bigger this time. Julia borrowed 10 grand for a down payment on a condo I knew she couldn't afford. Antonio needed 5 grand for a sure-thing crypto investment. Repayment? Don't make them laugh. The sabotage started small, like annoying paper cuts. My meticulously planned staff schedules would mysteriously change. Important messages from suppliers or reservation queries would somehow never reach me. Oh, sorry, must have forgotten, Julia would shrug, not even looking up from her phone. I arranged a crucial meeting with our main produce supplier to lock in better rates. Lorenzo called them an hour beforehand and changed the order completely, adding expensive out-of-season items we didn't need, making me look incompetent. Then my company laptop vanished from my locked office. Took it for an upgrade. IT needed it, Lorenzo said casually. It came back 3 days later, wiped clean with only basic OS installed. My files, my projections, my contacts, gone. Weird glitch was all he offered. That felt less like a paper cut and more like a knife twist. And the gaslighting. Oh, the gaslighting was Olympic level. Every time I tried to address an issue, the spending, the scheduling chaos, the undermining, it was my fault. I brought up Lorenzo changing the produce order. You didn't remind me about the budget constraints, he'd yell, conveniently forgetting the budget meeting he skipped. I pointed out the missing money. Julia would burst into tears, accusing me of attacking her, then run to our cousins, painting me as a jealous shrew. Suddenly, I was the bad guy in the family narrative they were carefully crafting. Confront Antonio about stealing again? He'd just stare blankly. I have no idea what you're talking about. Are you feeling okay? You seem stressed. They made me doubt my own sanity sometimes. The exclusion became blatant. Shared business accounts, bookkeeping software, supplier portals, social media admin. Suddenly my passwords didn't work. System update locked everyone out, Antonio would mumble, yet somehow their access was fine. I'd walk into the kitchen and find Lorenzo giving contradictory instructions to the cooks, bypassing me entirely. Julia started negotiating side deals with linen suppliers and event planners, things I normally handled, often agreeing to worse terms just to assert her imagined authority. Staff drinks after closing, weekend brainstorming sessions at Lorenzo's place. I was never invited. I became management, but not part of their management. Looking back, it was all coordinated. They were isolating me, neutralizing me, setting the stage. The end came faster and more brutally than I could have imagined. It was a Tuesday afternoon, usually slow, but we had a mandatory all-staff meeting scheduled. Standard stuff, discussing upcoming specials. Schedule changes. I was going over inventory notes in the office when Lorenzo poked his head in. Meeting time. Conference room. Odd. We usually met in the main dining area. I walked in, and the vibe was instantly wrong. All the staff were there, looking uncomfortable. My 3 siblings stood at the front, arms crossed. No agendas, no usual pre-meeting chatter. Lorenzo stepped forward, clearing his throat. "All right, everyone. Slight change of plans today. We, the primary family stakeholders," he gestured to himself, Julia, and Antonio, deliberately excluding me, "have made an important decision regarding the future management of Mama Rosa's." My blood ran cold. I could feel every eye in the room on me. "Effective immediately," Lorenzo continued, his voice smooth but laced with malice. "We are relieving my name of her management duties. We feel the business needs a new direction, one that she is unfortunately unable to provide due to ongoing issues with—" He paused for effect, glancing at a non-existent paper. Financial mismanagement and, frankly, creating a toxic work environment." Gasps rippled through the staff. Financial mismanagement? Me? The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. Toxic? Because I held them accountable? It was pure, unadulterated projection. "This wasn't an easy decision," Julia piped up, sounding utterly insincere, "but we had to put the family legacy first. Then came the vote." It wasn't really a vote, it was a preordained execution. Lorenzo nodded to Antonio. Antonio stepped forward, trembling slightly but with a cruel glint in his eye. "Yeah, like Lorenzo said, you just don't fit anymore. You're too negative, always counting pennies." He actually voted out. Julia followed, giving a little speech about needing fresh energy and how my old ways were holding them back. She voted out. Finally, Lorenzo. He looked directly at me, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. "You did. Okay. For a while. But it's time for real leadership. I vote out." He savored the words. The silence in the room was deafening. Humiliation washed over me in waves. In front of the staff I'd hired, trained, worked alongside, my own siblings, I felt numb, disoriented. Before I could even process it, Lorenzo snapped his fingers. As if on cue, a locksmith I didn't recognize appeared at the office door behind me. He immediately started working on the lock. "Security measure," Lorenzo announced loudly to the room. Then Antonio came over, holding a flimsy cardboard box crudely packed with a few personal items from my desk. A framed photo, a coffee mug, a small plant. He literally threw the box onto the floor near my feet. "Your stuff," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze now. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from Instagram. I glanced down. Julia had already posted a smiling selfie of the 3 of them in the restaurant with the caption, "Exciting new chapter for Mama Rosa's, or family first, check new beginnings." Already celebrating. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't argue. Something inside me just snapped shut, became cold, hard, all the pain, the sacrifice, the betrayal. It coalesced into a single point of icy clarity. I slowly raised my head. I looked directly at Antonio, held his gaze until he squirmed and looked away. I turned and looked directly at Julia, whose fake smile faltered under my stare. Finally, I looked directly at Lorenzo, the smug ringleader. I held his triumphant smirk with my own empty gaze. I saw the flicker of confusion, maybe even unease, behind his eyes as I just stared. Then, without a single word, I turned my back on them, on the staff, on the restaurant I had bled for, and I walked out the front door into the afternoon sun, leaving the sound of the locksmith drilling out the lock behind me. As I walked down the street, away from the life I had poured everything into, I pulled out my personal phone. Not the work phone they'd confiscated and wiped, but mine. I opened my Secure Files app. There they were, scanned copies of the building lease agreement and the state liquor license, both solely in my name, both set to expire in exactly 6 days. A slow, cold smile touched my lips for the first time that day. "Enjoy the business," I whispered to the empty air. They had no idea what was coming. Phase 1 of their plan was complete. Phase 1 of mine was just beginning. Those first few days after the lockout were strange. A part of me expected relief, freedom. Instead, there was just this vast, cold emptiness where the constant stress of Mama Rosa's used to be. And underneath that emptiness, something else was starting to harden. Anger. Pure, diamond-hard anger. They hadn't just taken the restaurant. They'd tried to annihilate my reputation, my contribution, myself in front of everyone. The humiliation burned, but it didn't consume me. It fueled me. While my siblings were busy celebrating their coup, likely popping champagne they couldn't afford, I wasn't idle. That same evening, I started making calls, quietly, strategically. First to Isabel, our incredibly talented head chef who'd stuck with me through the worst. Then to Javier, the charismatic bartender who knew every regular by name. And finally, to the few other core staff members, the reliable servers, the diligent kitchen hands, who I knew were loyal and competent, the ones my siblings would likely sideline or mistreat soon enough. I didn't offer them jobs immediately, I just planted a seed. Things might be changing drastically soon, I said. Keep your options open. I might have something interesting coming up. Meanwhile, the countdown clock was ticking in my head. 6 days, 5 days, 4. At Mama Rosa's, the predicted chaos erupted almost instantly. Without my oversight, Lorenzo's idea of management was apparently yelling louder. Julia's was rearranging the flower displays constantly, and Antonio's was, well, still mostly avoiding actual work. Reports trickled back to me through the staff I was still in contact with. Key suppliers, guys I'd spent years building relationships with, suddenly started demanding cash up front or mysteriously became unable to fulfill orders. Lorenzo tried throwing his weight around, but these guys had dealt with him before. They knew who paid the bills, me, and who just ran up tabs. They weren't extending credit to him. Predictably, checks started bouncing, first to the linen service, then the produce guy. Suppliers talk. Word gets around fast. The best remaining staff, tired of the yelling, the disorganization, and the sudden favoritism shown to Antonio's lazy buddies who were suddenly assistant managers, began polishing their resumes. Isabel told me the walk-in cooler was a disaster zone. FIFO, first in, first out, was a forgotten concept, and inventory was a mess, leading to food spoilage they just tried to hide. And the spending? Oh, the spending was glorious, in a train wreck sort of way. They celebrated their freedom by immediately purchasing a ridiculously expensive state-of-the-art espresso machine they barely knew how to use, convinced it would magically boost profits. They gave themselves management bonuses, draining the already fragile accounts, celebrating a success they hadn't earned and couldn't sustain. They even hired some slick restaurant consultant's friend of Lorenzo's, paying him an outrageous fee to tell them things like customer satisfaction is important and suggest repainting the bathrooms a more dynamic shade. Absolute clowns. The red flags waved frantically, but they were blind. A letter arrived from Mr. Stanley, the landlord, clearly addressed only to me. Julia apparently saw it, scoffed, and tossed it on the overflowing junk mail pile in the office. A crisp envelope arrived from the State Liquor Authority, the official license renewal reminder, again addressed solely to me as the listed holder. Antonio signed for it, glanced at the sender, and likely dumped it without reading, assuming it was bureaucratic nonsense someone else, me, usually would handle. Isabel, bless her loyal heart, tried one last time. She cornered Lorenzo and Julia, tentatively mentioning she overheard Mr. Stanley talking about the lease being solely in my name. They didn't just dismiss her, they fired her on the spot for spreading rumors and disloyalty. The bank called Lorenzo questioning some large consecutive cash withdrawals Antonio had made. Lorenzo apparently blustered about operational costs and hung up. They were living in a fantasy world, built on arrogance and ignorance. My own preparations continued under the radar. I finalized the lease on a small, industrially zoned kitchen space across town, perfect for a delivery-only ghost kitchen concept. I incorporated under a new, neutral name. I called Isabel, Javier, and the others I'd spoken to. Operation Phoenix is a go, I told them. I need you. Better pay, respectful environment, starting in 2 weeks. They didn't hesitate. I also scheduled a quiet coffee meeting with Mr. Stanley and a senior official at the Liquor Authority I knew slightly through industry events, just to touch base and politely reiterate my awareness of the upcoming expiry dates on my lease and my license. Laying groundwork, keeping channels open. 3 days left. 2 days left. The local news ran a small story about a popular downtown bar suddenly closing its doors due to an expired liquor license. Reading it, a grim sort of satisfaction settled in my gut. It wasn't just possible. It was procedural. I overheard Lorenzo on the phone loudly boasting to someone about their plans to franchise Mama Rosa's within the next year. The delusion was breathtaking. My own internal monologue became a mantra. Patience. Timing is everything. Let them implode. 1 day left. 0 hour approaching. The day the licenses officially expired was anticlimactic at first. Nothing exploded. The world didn't end. They probably opened the restaurant as usual, blissfully unaware. The hammer fell the next morning. It started with the mail. The official, non-negotiable license revocation notice from the State Liquor Authority arrived via certified mail. Antonio likely signed for it again, maybe even opened it this time, glanced at the intimidating letterhead, felt a flicker of unease, but probably rationalized it away. Bureaucratic crap. I could almost hear him mutter. The real panic likely set in when the alcohol distributors showed up for their morning delivery and flat out refused to unload. "Sorry, Lorenzo," the driver probably said, holding up his tablet. "System says your liquor license expired yesterday. We can't legally leave this here." No booze. For a restaurant relying heavily on its bar trade? Catastrophic. Cue the meltdown. Lorenzo probably started yelling at the driver. Julia likely burst into tears. Antonio almost certainly blamed everyone else. They scrambled, calling the distributor's head office, trying to pull strings with some mid-level councilman they knew, who couldn't do anything about a state license. They probably raged at the staff, complaining loudly about government overreach and ridiculous red tape, while desperately trying to figure out what went wrong. The horrible realization probably hit when one of them, maybe Julia in a moment of panic-induced clarity, dug through that pile of junk mail and found the landlord's letter addressed to me and the original unopened license renewal reminder. Then, perhaps, Antonio unearthed the actual old lease agreement and license documents from the safe. Noticing with dawning horror only my signature on the crucial lines, they might have dimly recalled a vague conversation years ago during the bailout where I mentioned needing sole signature authority, a detail they'd dismissed as unimportant at the time. Finally, in desperation, they called the family lawyer, the same semi-competent guy who handled Mom and Dad's wills. Even he, after a quick check of public records, would have delivered the grim news. The lease and the liquor license were indisputably, solely, legally mine, and they were expired. That's when my phone started exploding. Calls, texts, voicemails dripping with fake concern, then rising panic, then outright rage. Lorenzo, Julia, Antonio, one after another, a relentless barrage. I let every single call go to voicemail. Every text went unread. Silence was my loudest response. They apparently spent hours frantically trying to apply for new licenses online under their own names, only to be instantly rejected due to the existing, now expired but still linked license under my name, and likely flags about the business's recent instability. They even, according to a message from Javier, attempted to print fake renewal confirmations and forge my signature, trying to bluff the distributors. It didn't work, of course. The digital systems are too integrated now. Their desperation finally led them to confront me directly. It was Julia who tracked me down first, showing up weeping at the community college where I'd re-enrolled in some business management course. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded for me to just sign the renewals, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that they needed me. Her performance was almost convincing, except for the calculating look in her. I just looked at her, shook my head slightly. Later that evening, Lorenzo cornered me outside my apartment building. Gone was the smirk, replaced by a snarl. He tried threats, then abruptly switched tactic, actually offering me full control of the restaurant, cash and anything, if I just fix the light situation. "It's too late, I said, my voice. "You made your choice." He looked genuinely stunned. His bluster and begging were. It was pathetic. Letting the license expire with. Now it was time to actively dismantle. Operation Phoenix, my ghost kit, Urban Bites, went live on, offering contemporary, exactly the kind of as regular, but better executed. Javier, my new and highly operation manager, had mentally copied those regular, targeted ads and special. Simultaneously, I reached out to Isabel's staff my siblings had unjustly fired, offering them Urban Bites. They started immediately grateful. The final blow to their staffing 2 days later. The entire remaining kitchen, the line cook, the prep staff, walked out mid-dinner rush on a Friday night, leaving my siblings spatula. They walked straight over to Urban Bites. Their reputation was already suppliers were now demanding cash up front for even basic, and most quality vendors wouldn't deal with them at all. I made a few quiet calls myself, leveraging old relationships, letting key suppliers know about the siblings of bounce checks and bankrupt. I also happened to mention factually how they'd blatantly broken payment terms outlined in contracts I had originally voiding. Getting decent stock became nearly impossible for them. Then came the financial strangulation. Remember that complex bailout loan? The private lender wasn't exactly sentimental. Seeing the chaos, they were getting nervous. It didn't take much convincing, or rather, presenting the evidence of the fraudulent signature attempt on the license renewals, for them to agree to sell the distressed loan to an investment LLC I'd discreetly set up. Suddenly, I was their primary creditor. My lawyer immediately issued a demand for accelerated payment based on breach of management clauses, specifically ousting the guarantor, me. Simultaneously, we used the proof of their attempt to forge my signature on an insurance claim form. They'd clumsily damaged that new espresso machine and tried to claim it was faulty, as grounds to petition the court for an immediate freeze on all their known personal and remaining business accounts, citing ongoing fraudulent activity. Their cash flow, already critical, evaporated overnight. With the restaurant barely functioning, unable to legally serve alcohol, bleeding cash, and hemorrhaging staff, it was time for the kill shots. Anonymous tips, complete with time-stamped photos Isabel had discreetly taken before quitting, were sent to the health department, detailing the disgusting state of the walk-in cooler and rodent droppings near the storage area. Another anonymous tip, detailing specific dates and times, went to the state liquor authority regarding their attempts to serve alcohol even after the license had officially expired. A final tip, with photographic evidence Antonio had stupidly posted on a private social media account, which a former staffer still had access to, showed them illegally dumping used cooking oil down a storm drain late one night. Each tip was accurate, verifiable, and designed to trigger immediate painful inspections and fines. The siblings were spiraling. They were fighting constantly, blaming each other, their faces masks of stress and exhaustion. The news about the insurance fraud investigation, stemming from the forgery, broke them. Lorenzo, as the one who likely orchestrated it, was formally charged and arrested. Bail was set high. They couldn't afford it. Julia, desperate, launched a GoFundMe page with a sob story about unexpected hardships and saving a family legacy. It backfired spectacularly. People who knew the real story, former staff, aware locals, maybe even contacts I'd subtly informed, flooded the comments with the truth about the betrayal, the mismanagement, the fraud. The page was shamed into oblivion within hours. The final encounters were almost theatrical. The launch party for Urban Bites, held in a chic rented event space, was buzzing. Success felt good, clean, earned. Halfway through the evening, Lorenzo, out on a ridiculously high bond someone scraped together, and Julia appeared at the entrance, looking disheveled, eyes burning with hate. Security intercepted them immediately. Yes, I'd anticipated they might try something. They screamed obscenities, demanded to talk to me, looked utterly pathetic. I watched them being escorted away, feeling nothing but cold detachment. A week later, my lawyer arranged the other encounter. I summoned Antonio and Julia, Lorenzo was dealing with lawyers, to what I termed a final family meeting at my lawyer's office. They probably expected negotiation, maybe even mercy. Instead, I sat silently, while my lawyer formally served them with papers detailing the lawsuits, recovery of the defaulted loan, now mine, damages for lost income due to the illegal lockout, and personal liability claims stemming from the fraud. Their faces crumbled. As they sat there, stunned and broken, I spoke for the first time directly to them since that awful staff meeting. I didn't raise my voice. I just calmly, methodically detailed every single act of their betrayal, from the early thefts and lies to the final coup and the subsequent desperate, stupid fraud attempt. I connected each action to its consequence. The suppliers leaving, the staff quitting, the licenses expiring, the accounts freezing, the arrest. I laid it all bare. You see, I concluded, meeting their tear-filled, hate-filled eyes, every step of your downfall was paved with your own greed and stupidity. I let that sink in for a moment, then added, leaning forward slightly, my voice dropping to a whisper, this wasn't revenge. This was pest control. The aftermath was predictably bleak for them. Lorenzo eventually took a plea deal for the fraud, serving time and emerging with a criminal record that made any meaningful employment impossible. Julia and Antonio were saddled with insurmountable debt from the lawsuits and the failed business. They could never secure credit again, let alone dream of owning another business. Their reputation in our hometown was absolute garbage. Whispers followed them everywhere. Eventually, they had to move away, scattering to different states, disgraced and estranged from most remaining family, and definitely from each other. Last I heard, they were both working multiple low-paying jobs, barely scraping by, a shadow of their former entitled selves. And me, well, Urban Bites was doing incredibly well. So well, in fact, that when the original Mama Rosa's building, empty, neglected, shadowed by its recent history, came up for auction ridiculously cheap, thanks to the liens I held and its tarnished reputation, my LLC bought it. We renovated. We rebranded. We opened a new, vibrant restaurant, a completely different concept, respecting the location's history, but looking firmly forward. It's thriving. Am I happy? Mostly. Vindicated? Absolutely. But the whole ordeal changed me. That naive trust in family, that willingness to sacrifice endlessly, it's gone. Replaced by something harder, more watchful. Maybe that's the price of survival, the price of taking back what was stolen. They enjoyed the business for a few short, chaotic weeks. I'm enjoying the success built on its ashes every single day. And honestly, it tastes a hell of a lot like justice. That's all for this story. I'll be back with another one. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It motivates me to create more content like this.